Estamos en otro capítulo de la Entrevista Educativa, este espacio que hemos creado en el portal Educarchile para tener la posibilidad de sacarle el jugo, sacarle mucho partido a nuestros invitados internacionales que vienen a Chile y que nos gusta tener un mayor conocimiento de lo que ocurre con ellos. En este caso tengo la oportunidad de hablar con una invitada muy especial, con Beverly Freedman, profesora de distintas universidades de Canadá y también del OIC, la Universidad de Toronto, que se dedica básicamente a la formación de directivos escolares. Ella misma fue una directiva escolar y fue incluso superintendente de educación. Y por lo tanto, no solo habla de un conocimiento teórico, sino también de un conocimiento práctico. How are you, Bev?
I'm excellent, thank you.
Maybe we can begin for the new task of the principals. Why the principals are so important now and not in the past?
Prior to about 2000, we thought principals were important for affecting the climate and a culture of the school, but we didn't think they had an impact on student achievement. And we now know from the research that 25% of all school-based factors for student learning are directly impacted by the role of the principal. And given the pressures of PISA, of PEARLS, of TIMSS, how the OECD is looking at education as a determinant for economic growth, principals' role has become critical.
That is that the principals are critical for the school improvement. That is the main result of this research, and that, in your view, is the main factor that changes the role of the principal.
So the principal's important on several levels. The principal's important in terms of being aware of what's happening in classes and engaging teachers in conversation. So the principal becomes the lead learner, but a learner along with the teachers as part of those professional conversations. But also the principal's important for monitoring. So if the school improvement plan says this is what the school is working on, it's the principal who has the opportunity to look across classrooms. And also it's the principal who normally is the front line with parents in the community. So in many ways, the principal becomes the lightning rod for school improvement. Not by themselves, they're only as effective as they create trust and work through others.
To the others people. Yes, because one possibility is to understand that as a sort of superhero that is in the classroom and at the same time is with the teachers and with the parents and etc., etc. And it's so much task. You think that they can prioritize some kind of task in the work of the principals?
Well, what we don't need is a superhero. But we certainly could use a hero who could create a whole team of superheroes. Okay. So we're looking at shared ownership and shared leadership. Traditionally, principals have spent their time on the management part of the role. Are the timetables done? Are the textbooks done? Is the school clean? All of those things are important, but they're not going to impact student learning. So if you're serious, as Chile is serious, not only about raising academic bars, but even more importantly about closing academic gaps, then the principal has to recognize that their primary role is the role of a pedagogical leader, because that's what will impact student learning.
And for that, the main work of the principals is to work with the teachers, to create with the teachers a community or to try to develop their competencies and skills. This is your idea.
And also to, as I said, to be visible, to understand what learning looks like in their building, and to work collegially with other principals in learning communities that would be peer-to-peer, principal to principal. So more and more we've recognized that we're looking at co-learning, collective learning. The principal learning with teachers, principals learning with other principals, and we need the dialogue. But to have the dialogue without evidence, without data, only gets you so far. If we're serious about improvement, we need the pressure and support. We need the evidence, and we need the ways to move forward.
This is interesting because it's another culture. It's a culture of cooperation, but also have important implications. For example, the idea of deprivatize the practices, because to cooperate or to have the possibility to express and to review your practice and to show this practice to others.
There was a very interesting article by Jeffrey Glantz who said traditionally there are three things that are standing the way of improvement. The first he called conservatism. We've always done it this way. This is the way it's done here. Immediacy. So what principals focus on is the current crisis, as opposed to looking across issues and saying our focus is on student learning and improvement and the persistence of privacy. So it was for teachers, my classroom, my students. For principals, it was my school, my fiefdom. None of those are effective from what we now know about the research if we're serious about not only moving schools forward, but moving systems and countries forward.
What is the main competencies and the skills that a principal must have today?
So they have to be, for me, passionate about learning. Their learning, adult learning, the learning of their teachers, and the learning of the students. We talk less about teaching and much more today about learning. They have to be comfortable with data, so they have to be data literate. They have to understand what learning, visible learning looks like. They have to be current with the research or at least know where to access that research. And they have to build trusting, collaborative relationships. They have to walk the talk and talk the walk. So for me, it's not enough that principals are visible in classrooms. If they're not engaged in conversations, then you're really not moving the agenda forward. They have to be organized. They're going to work long hours. It's a really challenging job today.
It's interesting, this point about the data. What do you think about this use of the data? You are talking about the test and this kind of data or other kind of data?
Multiple sets of data. So absolutely, in terms of the tests, how do you aggregate and disaggregate when you slice the data by gender, by students with special needs, by students whose second or third language is Spanish, and how they fare in terms of their cohorts. We look at suspension data. We look at attendance data. We now know that if students have poor attendance in primary and kindergarten, it makes horrible implications for students moving into secondary because they have gaps in their learning. We look at student survey data. How do the students feel about being intellectually engaged in school, about feeling part of the school? We look at data around bullying. We look at report card data. We put all of those data sets together, and we begin to say, in this school, in this community, what are the students doing well, and what's standing between them and the learning, and how do we move on?
It's a search of evidence, of different kind of evidence about the diagnosis of the school and the possibility for improvement.
And evidence in looking at the data, but increasingly in Ontario schools, visible evidence of the learning in the classrooms and in the halls. So we will see posted learning goals. We will see rubrics or success criteria attached to student work. When you go to a school, schools are learning institutions. Learning should be visible. And I recently was at a school, School of Poverty, where most of the students' second, third, fourth language is English, inner city, and the students created a learning walk where the students gathered the evidence of their learning. They put it in the gymnasium from kindergarten to grade 8, and they took their parents and their teachers and they explained to them what the learning was. It was very powerful.
You talk about the challenging circumstances in Toronto with these multilingual classrooms with different students, and that will be very challenging, sure, for the teachers and for the principals too. But in Chile we have another kind of challenging circumstances, which is the poverty. What do you think about that? Do you think that the principal have other kind of characteristic or competency if they work in this type of context, or not? Is the same general characteristic for a good principal that can work everywhere?
Well, in terms of Canada's results on the international assessments, not only are we the top performing English language country in the world, but more importantly, our students of poverty do better than almost anyone else's in the world. So I've recently come back from Norway. Norway's a very rich country. Their PISA results are about that of Chile. Money, for me, is an issue, it's not the issue. And part of it is convincing principals and convincing teachers that children of poverty are every bit as capable of learning. The structures and the supports look different, but it doesn't mean they can't learn. It doesn't mean they don't have the potential. So we have in Toronto some very, very wealthy areas where parents easily could send their children to private schools, like in Chile. And because the quality of the public school system is so good, those children are in public education, not in private education. So that if you have children of poverty, it means that the focus of the school becomes more important, because you're not having parents who are reading to the children at home or providing space for the homework or even being able to help children with homework. So it means we look at schooling now differently. It is then the school's responsibility to provide those critical literacies. The American research is that a child of poverty entering school hears 50 million less words than a middle-class child. But we can make up that difference. If teachers believe the children are capable, we do a lot of very rich academic vocabulary, problem solving, a lot of students working together collaboratively, and we set up structures differently to allow them to succeed. So poverty shouldn't be an excuse or a life sentence.
Okay, but this is not to say that you don't have another kind of challenges for the principal, no?
Absolutely. So it means that you want like schools working together. So if you're a principal and your students come from a very low socioeconomic circumstance where the parents may be mobile or no one graduated high school, you want to be working with other like schools, working on the same types of things so that you can serve as a support system to one another.
It's interesting. In Chile, the competency that we have among the system, among the schools, was that it is very difficult, this kind of network, but I understand that in the world it's very interesting to see that progress and increase. Maybe we can change the focus now to the training and formation system for principals. What do you think about that, about the training system, and in particular in the pre-service? What do you think that is the form to select, and what kind of skills and knowledge you bring for this kind of candidates to be principals?
In Ontario, basically you need a master's degree and 5 years of teaching and some evidence of leadership. There are 2 courses offered by the Ontario College of Teachers who sets the regulations. Sometimes the Principals Council, sometimes universities offer the courses Principal Qualification Part 1 and 2. And I've actually taught those courses so that we give principals 120 hours in each course with some practical experience of what that job means. And there's some job shadowing. And then normally you'd be interviewed and selected, and we create an entry plan and then you're mentored. So you're now attached to an experienced principal who acts as your coach. And then as you grow in the role, you'll be in a situation of teaming with other principals. We call it Leading Student Achievement, sponsored by the Ontario government, by all of the principals' councils together. And they work across the province in like groups on all of those issues of poverty, English language learners, improving our math scores, problem solving, whatever it is, increasing technical literacy, where we're like you in this whole process of rethinking high schools. And eventually, as you work your way through, and you're always expected to learn and grow, then you become the coach and mentor of other principals. So it's like a life cycle.
But you have this system of, why you arrived to this system of mentors and coaches? You analyze that the other old system of courses and so on are not so good?
What we found is that we can give you all the courses you want, and many of the problems you will have in your first 3 weeks were never in anyone's course. And so what you need is someone you can speak to who's been in the job, because it's how do you make reasonable decisions? How do you communicate strategically so you're not alienating people? How do you build trust? And to do that, you actually need to be in the job and have someone you can phone or speak to, or who will drop in, who can give you good advice. And the courses alone won't do it. It was because we had principals faced with things that were unexpected, and some of them fell through the cracks, that we decided we needed to put in much better base of supports.
But the coaches are all the time principals or ex-principals?
That's correct.
They have the real experience of the job.
That's right. And we do the same thing with new teachers. They're supported by teachers in the field and superintendents. Not when I was a superintendent, but now new superintendents have a superintendent buddy who will lead them through, because what we've learned is people make better decisions when they have those types of supports, and then you're not backfilling.
And in terms of the professional development, when the principal is there, they have this kind of induction with the coach and so on. But at that time, what kind of possibilities do you think that is important to offer to the principals?
So part of it is that piece, Leading Student Achievement. We created a list of competencies. Ken Leithwood worked with the Ministry of Education in creating it, and has recently done the analysis of all of the things, which make the most difference in terms of leadership. But essentially it's come down to, we are better collectively than individually, and if a situation arises that is a difficult, challenging situation, you are always best off checking with other people before you make whatever decision you make. And there's not enough hours of courses in the world that can cover absolutely every situation principals deal with, because, as I said, many of them, they happen to you and you just blink and you think, this was never in a course I ever did.
The reality is, education reality is so complex. Well, really thank you, Professor Beverly Freedman, to talk with us about the principals and the training of principals. And you have the last question that we have in La Entrevista Educativa. It's all the time the same. If you must give one advice to our educational system, to our education, what is your advice?
So we were in conversation earlier today. Your schools have school improvement plans. they're not the same school improvement plans, and they're not monitored, and they're likely not data-driven and focused on student learning. So I would be re-looking at the school improvement plans for all of the schools in Chile, driving data, driving student learning, and then using those collegially to develop your networks, to establish collaborative reviews so that we collectively learn as we begin to move forward and use the research and best practice to drive changes here.
Oh, thank you, Bev Freedman.
Thank you.
Bueno, y como ustedes saben, tenemos todos otros capítulos de la entrevista educativa en www.educarchile. Los invitamos también a seguirla y tenemos otras entrevistas que, como la que se le hizo hoy día a la profesora Bev Freedman, ustedes pueden consultar ahí.